This is the Throw Big Throw Far podcast, brought to you by Thrower X, for throwers and coaches who want to get better. Thrower X, own your throw. Dan McQuaid, it is fantastic to have you back. Thanks so much for being here.
I am super happy to be here.
And Vesteinn Hafsteinsson, what an honor it is to have you back on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's fun.
We're going to talk about the men's discus competition, but Dan, you were there in person. Can you give us just some of the circumstances? This is a crowded stadium, energy. Just can you get us into the stadium and get us a feel for the atmosphere as the men's discus was about to begin?
Yeah, and it was enlightening to me because I always thought that the World Championships and the Olympics to track and field athletes were on par, right? It's you're going out there against the best people. What difference does it make if you call it Olympics or call it World Championships? Vesteinn has told me, though, in our times working together on our two books about Daniel Stahl, which are available on Amazon, by the way, and other outlets. Vesteinn has told me that there is a big difference between Worlds and Olympics. So you and I, Joe, were at the Worlds in Eugene, and I thought the atmosphere was fantastic, fun, lively crowd. The Olympics was a whole nother level. 80,000 seat stadium. Crowd absolutely engaged, especially if someone French was in the in the competition. Like in the men's discus prelims, there was a French person, a French dude. But even French person or no, the crowd was just happy and noisy and going nuts, and it just felt really, really special. So I can see what all the fuss was about. I'm so glad that I was able to do that. You walk in the stadium. I thought the French did a great job. The stadium is really easy to get into, really easy to get out of. There's public transportation really close by, at least 3 different public transportation stations. Like there was in Eugene, there's like a row of food carts and drink carts outside. So just a really happy atmosphere. The weather was beautiful, no humidity. And where I watched the throws from was there happened to be an area you could stand overlooking the throws cage. And I just blundered on that the first day during the men's discus qualification. I just happened to walk in that entrance to the stadium and boom, there it was. And I never left it. I have no idea what the rest of the stadium looks like. So I'm standing there. The sun is still shining into the stadium, and there's a nice breeze. And how this happened, Vesteinn can talk about this more intelligently than me. How a breeze gets into an 80,000 seat stadium like that, I don't know. But you could tell it felt like a nice little helpful breeze for a right-handed discus thrower. So not only was there no humidity, and it was perfectly comfortable, but maybe a little helping wind. So that was so exciting. And yeah, it was the perfect atmosphere it turned out for some far discus throwing.
Vesteinn, you've been in a stadium like this for an Olympic Games in many hats, not only as an athlete, but as a coach. What are some of the things that these throwers and coaches are doing in terms of the logistics of just prepping for something? We see them come into the stadium, they get in the circle a couple times, but it's a long day of kind of prep and outside of the stadium prep. What's the day like for an Olympian and a finals day for the men's discus?
Well, you leave usually like 3.5, 4 hours before competition from the Olympic Village. And in this case here, the transportation from the Olympic Village to the stadium was not very far. And it worked out well after athletics or track and field started. It was problems in the first week and took a long time to travel through swimming and different events. And there were some complaints about that. But when the track and field started, everything worked out well. And it was only like a 10-15 minute bus ride. Some throwers like to throw then on the outfield, like in a throwing stadium nearby, and do some warm-ups there, but some don't. And then there's call room 1 and call room 2. So the process takes like 1 hour before you go into call room 1, and then some of the throwers have done their warm-up before that, some have not. And then there's 20-minute wait, and then call room 2, and everything is checked out in relation to your bib numbers, shoes, uniform, etc., pass, accreditation, and that kind of stuff. And then you go into the stadium with maybe 15, 16 throws in your group, and you get your 2 warm-up throws with 10 minutes in between, and it's pretty much the same kind of procedure in every meet, on every Olympics, and it's a long process. And if people have not trained that process, it's a tough one. And sometimes in hot weather, sometimes in rain, and that kind of stuff. So a lot of people have a hard time in those big meets because the process is so long. And after you have done your 2 warm-ups on the infield, it's like 3 hours before you left the village. So it's a tough one.
Is there there's an element where I think I remember as an athlete, not at this level, but be so excited about competition day. And this is truly kind of the longest, I think, process of any meet. Like the Olympics are just a longer, world athletics, a little bit of a longer process, but that energy level, you only have so much energy in a day. It's almost like you just got to kind of suppress all that energy until you get to really go. How did you manage that with yourself and with your athletes in terms of prepping for that leading into the Olympics?
Well, I was not very successful myself. Of course, I made the final, but in Barcelona in 1992, but I never really performed up to my potential because I come from a little country and everything was simple. I brought up in America on a throwing field where it's almost like a picnic, and I really liked the way you do it in America, hanging out at the throwing field, throwing far in good conditions with no cold rooms or no nothing, eating hamburgers in between, etc. I really like that. But at the same time, this is another ball game. And I decided as a coach, I'm going to prepare my athletes for this, and we are going to train this. So we have gone through this many times in training and thrown with 15 minutes in between, and going through call room 1 and call room 2 and this whole process, and then got 3 throws and put a line out on 64.5 meters, and you have to do that in 3 throws, and we prepared for this both in the old days with Gert Cantor and company and with Daniel Stahl later on, and it was hard for them to begin with, but then we trained this until we managed to be able to do that in practice, and then we did it also in the meets. And then later on, I very often wondered why people are warming up on the outfield like 1.5 hours before the competition, because you usually don't do that. You don't do that in any other meets. So why are you doing it here? So why don't you just prepare and save energy in this heat and that kind of stuff and in this long process, and just get used to warming up with 2 throws in every meet you compete all year, so you can skip this warm-up on the outfield or the throwing field 1.5 hours before. I've never really, for the last 10 years, really never understood why people are doing that. So we skipped that. Gert Cantor did that, and I wanted him to skip it because Malakovsky and Harting, when they came and they were young, they didn't do it. So I felt like I learned from Mykolas Alekna something that he called energy saving process. Use your energy on what's important, and what is important for big people to use their energy on, to throw in the meet. And because of that, we just got into a rhythm in every meet, warm up with 2 warm-up throws, and then you do the same in the Olympics. So we simplified it very much, and because of that, my guys were extremely good at this, more or less, both Daniel Stahl and Simon Pettersson through the years. And I think we were just kind of smart to do it that way. But some people are wasting a lot of energy both with extremely long hours and also this warm-up before, so they are kind of tired when they compete and also mentally drained.
Very interesting. Dan first, and then maybe Vesteinn can chime into this too. I'm of the impression that this is the discus final that in all my years of being very close to the throws, I was looking forward to the most. Just the historical context of Mykolas breaking the world record this year, what Daniel Stahl and what Kristjan Ceh have done, the depth of the number of 70-meter throwers that were in this field. Dan, can you remember a year where maybe it was as palpable of an excitement going into and anticipating big throws in another Olympic year?
No, I think that it would have been a disappointment had the Olympic record held up for this competition, you know, especially with those conditions that I described earlier. It was really exciting. Now, the qualification round was odd in that it took what I consider to be a pretty low number to get through, right? There were a lot of nerves in the qualification round, even though the weather was gorgeous. What Vesteinn was talking about, that you know, the weirdness of it, the whole process, I think that got to a lot of people. And there's a couple guys went one and done. I think Lukas WEIßHAIDINGER went one and done. Clemens PRÜFER, which was surprised, went one and done. But Daniel didn't. Kristjan didn't. Mykolas didn't. And there's just there was a lot of nerves and a lot of discomfort in the qualification. None of that was evident in the final. You know, it just was. I just read, there was an article in the Washington Post that I saw on the way home from Paris, which was so timely, and it was about what happens in your brain under pressure, right? The biological response in the brain, and sometimes it just sabotages you. We've all seen this. We were just talking about it before we got on. You know how sometimes an athlete your brain just freezes, but sometimes that little dose of excitement makes your brain function at its highest level. And it seemed like that was in full force at this competition. You know, it just, I mean, you can see from the numbers, we're going to talk our way through it, but man, there was just some throwing, and the amount, the distance it took to get in the top 8 was just under 66, I think, wasn't it? Something crazy.
Yeah, amazing. Seventh place was 66.95, 8th place 66.55.
Yeah. So, you know, and again, the atmosphere, the 80,000 happy people cheering, other events going on, beautiful weather, nice breeze, and standing there with Vesteinn, our friend David Sweeney from Ireland, and just wow, it just doesn't get any better than that.
Vesteinn, can you remember kind of an energy before going in with expectations of the depth of the field like we saw here in Paris in previous years?
No, like this ended up being the final I was expecting, because it really reminds me on the World Championships in 2017, when the new kids on the block came. It was like GUDŽIUS won, Daniel got second, Finlay got third, Discus was in there, WEIßHAIDINGER was in there, and they took over the situation from Malakovsky, Harding brothers, etc. Now these guys have been there for 7 years, since 2017, and you see where they are located now. Lukas is 5th, Daniel is 7th, Andrius is 8th. And suddenly there are guys that are born around the 2000 year dominating the sport. And I actually had bet with my friends here in the Olympic Village, and my bet was that Alekna would win, Denny would get second, and Kristjan Ceh would get third. Then the wild card came there, Stona, and won. And I just loved when that happens. It's just like, it's good for the sport. It's a huge talent, like a sprinter with a discus is in his hand. And it's even better that Ryan Crouser is helping him out, because he's my favorite thrower. And I think Ryan Crouser is the best thrower of all time. So like, I just love to see that happen. And it was the same in the javelin. The guy from Pakistan came there. In women's shot put, the German girl won. I just love when new people come and do well. But then at the same time, Alekna, Matty Denny, and Kristjan Ceh have been doing great for the last couple of years and kind of taking over this business. Daniel came strong back last year and threw the furthest throw in history in our global championships that I was very happy about. But now it looks like those guys that are born 1991, 1992, Daniel, GUDŽIUS, Discus, WEIßHAIDINGER are kind of going down, and that's normal. They've been there for 7 years. And now it's the new kids coming through, probably that are going to be the best discus throwers of all time until this point. And it's just unbelievable to see how far Alekna is throwing, even though the discus is not flying. I love the technique of Matty Denny, and he just gets better and better. Kristjan Ceh is struggling a little bit, but you can't count him out because what he did 2 years ago. And Stona comes and blows everybody away and throws 70 meters and breaks Olympic record. I think it's just a class act, and I just love it. I get goosebumps when I talk about it.
You mentioned earlier you come from a small country. Now, Jamaica, population-wise, is a little bit bigger, but there are 3 Jamaicans in this final, the men's discus. Dan, can you explain that to me? Like, how is that possible?
I wish I could explain it to you. And, you know, that's something that Vesteinn and I were talking about earlier that day. We had a long lunch with Breck, the coach from Rice, who's coaching Icelandic shot putter, and with Mika Sosna, who stopped by, the young German thrower, stopped by and hung out with us. Well, what's going on? Because no Americans in that final, and I'm not bad-mouthing America or American discus throwing. I love, you and I both, all 3 of us, we know a lot of those guys, and they're great guys, and I'm sad that was the case. But how do you explain 0 Americans and 3 Jamaicans? And
not only that, but Frederick Dakers didn't make the Jamaican team. Like, you know,
right.
like there's another guy who's thrown, you know, extremely far.
He had a pretty good year. Yeah, it wasn't like he, you know, dropped off the map. So this is something that bears deep analysis. I have no answer for you other than those, and those 3 guys are just doing great. They showed up in the final. They made Jamaica look good, and what they're doing right in Jamaica, I don't know.
Yes, I've got some technical questions. We see different types of discus throwing. We've gone into length on this podcast about, you know, going way back, the differences between like John Powell in the back versus what Mac Wilkins was doing in the back. I think a lot of people have taken notice of what Mykolas Alekna is doing in the circle, kind of how short that path is on his sweep and how he kind of cuts across the left leg. Are there things that you see in your technical mind that some of these guys are doing that are maximizing? You mentioned Matty Denny's technique. They're maximizing what their abilities, you know, offer them. Everyone throws differently stylistically, but do you see some things that are interesting to you that maybe some throwers and coaches should be paying attention to with these amazing throwers?
Yeah, definitely, because I see, and I've said that before, if you isolate the discus thrower from the physical shape and from the mental aspect, and you just look at the discus, then Mykolas Alekna is the best discus thrower I've ever seen. It's just like amazing what he does in the circle, and he more or less reminds me very much of Valerie Allman on the women's side. They're just more or less doing it theoretically right from the beginning to the end, and it's just like action reaction principle. Everything is so smooth and everything is so easy and everything is more or less correct. It's simple, and I can relate more to Alekna than Allman because it's a little bit more complicated, because he's a former dancer and can do things that almost no girls can do. But Alekna has a simple backswing. He's extremely relaxed, goes around the left really well, drives across, very dynamic, got good separation and unbelievable speed. And this is a typical example how to throw the discus. And like if you take Mac Wilkins in the 70s, it was very hard to copy. It was more complicated backswing. It was longer. It was like up and down. And Mac jumped up like 30 centimeters at the end, and Alekna jumping up a little bit too. But I like the simplicity of it. Then I have to say also, there is a reason for Matty Denny is throwing so well. He's one of the best competitors that is out there, and he throws PBs in every big championships, and he's up to 69.5 now. His technique is absolutely outstanding. And I talked to him and his coach a few years ago, and I was analyzing a little bit with them, and I couldn't find very much wrong there. But if you take those two, these are extremely good discus throws. Then you see, like, you can compete with Kristjan Ceh on length and long arms, and then of course that is his strength. You cannot compete with Daniel Stahl on strength, or Andrius GUDŽIUS or Lukas WEIßHAIDINGER on how big and strong these guys are. And at the end of the road, you have to use what you have. And I decided to make Daniel the strongest guy on earth, and you know, tell him how, like, or that he would learn to compete. And then he ended up having a pretty decent technique. But like Roje Stona is also like a physical specimen from my point of view. When he was running towards Krauser after he threw the 70 meters, he looked like Usain Bolt. I mean, he was so elastic in his steps that I've never seen a discus thrower jog like that. It was like a trampoline under his legs. So it's definitely a sprinter with a discus in his hand. So he is like a physical specimen, throws simple, effective technique. But my favorites are Alekna and Matty Denny. They're just outstanding discus throws. And if some young kids were copying Gert Cantor at the time, it's a simple technique. When I was coaching him, and a lot of people have told me that they thought that was a simple technique. I think like a combination of Alekna and Matty Denny, it's a simple way of throwing extremely effectively of those modern discus throwers. And these are the best discus throwers going into the future. Alekna has already broken the world record as a 22-year-old. She's throwing 70 meters. And then, of course, Roje Stona comes and just shocks everybody. And I just love it.
So the two things that stood out to me before I talk about Roje Stona were those two guys. I've been so impressed with Matty Denny. You go back to the last Olympics where he PRs and comes in fourth. Huge throws at the World Championships. Wins the Diamond League last year. When I had him on the podcast, I've heard a lot of good throwers say, you know, I go out there and I expect to win. And when he said that to me, I think the normal human would say, well, you don't really expect to win. Like Daniel Stahl and Kristjan are just, they're way out there and they're better. But the way he said it, the conviction he has in his capabilities was unwavering. And there was no bullshit in it. It was just like, I'm training to go and win. And since he'd been on the podcast, all he's done is gotten better. And he won the Diamond League after that. And then this was spectacular. His season's been spectacular. 69-31, spectacular. The other thing that stood out to me was Mykolas's first throw, that 68-55, looked like the easiest 68-meter throw that I've ever seen. I mean, it just looked so easy. And I think it speaks to what Vesteinn was saying about his technique is very simple. It's so pure. It was really beautiful thing to watch. Dan, Roje Stona. This says something about, I'm just going to go out there and take my swings because what the hell? And when it lines up, man, He lined it up. Alekna breaks the Olympic record, his father's Olympic record, 69.97 in round 2. And 2 rounds later, I don't know that anyone has had Roje Stona in the gold slot or maybe even in the top 3, but there he was anyway. Can you speak to that?
I think that, mentally he was in a great place because of what you said. When we did our preview, I don't think you or I or Darrell Hill had Roje picked as a medalist, right? He goes to the NFL mini camp in the spring. I believe he went to a brief rookie camp. If somebody would have liked him, I think he would have been in an NFL camp instead of in Paris, right? You try it out for an NFL team. They're not giving you time off to train and go to the Olympics. So he, even though he threw 69 meters in Oklahoma, that's easily dismissed too, right? Because you can say, oh yeah, that's Oklahoma. So I don't think he had any burden of expectation on him.
I think that the expectation also, when you have Ryan Krauser in your corner telling you you got this, has to be a boost, to say the least. John Newell and Krauser being there, and the excitement they had after that throw. Roje was excited, but he wasn't surprised. It wasn't like,
I think you're right.
I think that we saw surprise maybe not surprised that she threw that far, but surprised that she was in first place from the German shot player. Like true, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm in first place. Roje mentally, I think, felt like he was in the game, the whole time. And then I got this. Let me go take my throws and see what happens.
And it looked like Roje, John Newell, and Krauser were perfectly in sync. You look down there, like, Vesteinn said, when Roje would bound over and talk to them, and they just like they were perfectly in sync. Same with Mykolas, Mo, and Mantis Usus. It looked like they were just that the thrower could draw strength from that, being in that part, having those two coaches together got your back. And I'm sure when Roje or Mykolas came over to the rail, none of those coaches were giving them detailed technical advice, right? That's another thing that Vesteinn emphasized in the books that we wrote is, you keep everything simple at a big competition. One cue, right, Vesteinn, that you rehearse in advance. But again, I think both those guys drew strength and power from their coaches, from that great relationship they have. And man, I don't know. Great, and they both, Mykolas, I know was probably had to be disappointed because he's young and he didn't get the gold medal, but he broke the dang Olympic record. So fantastic performance on his part. And you just got to tip your hat to Roje, right? You go in and you break the Olympic record. You've done your job. If somebody beats you, what can you do?
I don't think there was a single person who thought Alekna didn't have a shot to take the record back and move into first place. I think we're almost expecting it round by round, like when's it going to happen? Alekna series 4 marks 68.55, 69.97, a foul in round 3, 68.88, 68.49. I mean, the consistency there, and think about, all of the Olympic championships that would have won gold. Obviously with the Olympic record, to boot, before Stona overtakes him. It's a remarkable series, and his youth, who knows what's possible. But he's going to have to wait. He's going to have to wait another 4 years before he gets another crack at it.
Vesteinn, is that what's so hard about the Olympics, is that it's every 4 years? And so sometimes do you go into it thinking, oh my God, I've got to win that medal this time because who knows what's going to be happening in 4 years?
Yeah, since the World Championship started to be in every other year, and for us Europeans, we have European Championship every second year as well. But the Olympic Games is something special. And like, if I think about my 2 Olympic champions in discus, it was tough. It was tough to go as a world champion, Gerd Kantor, into the Olympic Games, more or less undefeated with all the pressure. And it was tough. And he was just so good at the time that we calculated out that he needed to throw 68.80. That was his average 10 meet competition, and he threw 68.82 and won. And when Daniel comes 13 years later and wins the Olympic Games in Tokyo, his top 10 average of 10 best meets that year was 69.06. So I said, if he throws 69 meters, he's going to win. And he threw 68.90 and won. It is both times for my guys, it was the same. They didn't hit it like Stona did. Stona nailed this throw because there was absolutely no pressure on him. He threw 66.16 or something, and then he nailed 70 meters because he was the underdog. He was coming, nobody was thinking about that he was going to be there. I thought he was going to throw 64, 65 meters, like Mullings maybe. And then he nails it and he hits it. He really hit it. He hit a great throw. But when you are the best, you are the world champion, Gert in 2007, Daniel in 2019, then COVID comes, so you have to wait for a year, and nothing but a win is a loss. That's tough.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard to do. And I'm definitely sure, even though Alekna is kind of new on the block and Kristjan, they felt a little bit like they were supposed to win.
Yeah.
One of those. Matthew maybe were not supposed to win. He had a chance to win. But nobody thought Stona was going to win. And then he just nailed it. So there was absolutely no pressure on him. So he performed way over what he should have done at the same time as both of my Olympic champions threw an average throw. They were just so good at the time that that was enough. So it's a different approach. And Olympic Games is every 4th year, and it's the biggest thing that can happen to you. And everybody wants to win that. And because of that, nobody has thrown over 70 meters until now. And then a guy does that nobody really expects to do it. And then maybe next year when the world is coming around, Stona is going to feel a little pressure.
Yeah, right? I think it will change immensely what's going to happen.
It could be. I'm not saying, I hope it's not going to change and he's going to throw 71.50, but this was just like unbelievable, and I just love it when it happens.
I'm going to run through this final real quick. Ralford Mullings, 9th, 65.61, another very young thrower. 8th, GUDŽIUS, 66.55. Daniel Stahl, 66.95. Clemens PRÜFER, who 67.41, was very impressive from a guy who was not, not a player in these games the last several years. Very impressed with his performance. WEIßHAIDINGER, 67.54. Ceh, 68.41. Matthew Denny, 69.31. Congrats, Matty. 69.97 from Mykolas Alekna, and obviously the 70-meter and now new Olympic record from Roje Stona, 70 meters. Unbelievable. Dan, as we move into thinking about 2028, you heard Vesteinn talk very illuminating about just how at some point throwers time out, right? 4 years from now, we're going to see some of these guys starting to fade away and or maybe fade more or walk away from the sport, retire. But we have some very young blood in this group that we might see for many, many years. What gets you excited thinking about the men's discus as we move forward here?
Well, you never know. Mykolas seems to have an unlimited ceiling. We don't know what his ceiling is, right? He's so young. He's being trained really wisely by Mo and Mantis. They're not sacrificing the long haul to try to squeeze, huge throws out of him right now. So what he has thrown so far, he's done on talent and technique. He's just going to get stronger, It'll be funny to see if he starts looking more like his dad. I got to tell you really a quick one. When I was waiting for the discus, the final to start, right? I've got my spot overlooking the cage, and I got there like 90 minutes early because I was gonna get that spot. I wasn't gonna let anybody take it. So I'm standing there, I look around, and I see this huge guy in a Lithuanian jersey over by the concession stand. And my first thought was, Gudzius snuck out of the call room and he's getting a hot dog. What the heck? And then I look closer, and it's Virgilis. He's over there, you know, getting some concessions, and he is a big unit. And so it'll be interesting to see if Mykolas starts developing, you know, as he matures physically a little bit more along those lines. God only knows how far he's going to throw. And the other guys, it's just hard to say, you know, and like with, you know, Vesteinn, you've been through this. When it was Daniel's time in 21, he came through. Seaman pulled a Roje Stona in 21, right? Except he didn't quite win. But then Seaman's career kind of fell off, and he wasn't even in this Olympics. So you just never know. It's so hard to predict and look ahead. And I think that's what makes the Olympics the Olympics. You know, if it's your time, if it's your magic moment, you got to seize it, because tomorrow is not guaranteed. So I guess it's a long-winded way of avoiding a direct answer to your question. Of all these guys, I got to pick Mykolas as, you know, the one who you think will be killing it in LA, but who knows?
I'm going to take the maybe the pressure of assigning names to who we see in the future, but Vesteinn, I feel like the 70 was like this magical number, and the throwers that were capable of doing it were unicorns in our sport. And now there's a lot of throwers throwing 70. What's happening at Throwtown Ramona in Oklahoma maybe is going to produce more 70-meter throws. The proliferation of information, the quality of coaching, and technology in terms of, you know, velocity training. There's all sorts of advantages that maybe is creating more throwers who are at this higher end of 66, 67, 68, 69, and 70-meter throws. Are we going to see more of this, or are we on kind of a bubble that might burst at some point in the ebb and flow of this sport?
No, I think it's going to be more of it, because coaching is getting better, and if we take like what Valerie Allman has been doing with Seb, it's just absolutely outstanding. And I think it's a great example of a good coach and a good athlete that is absolutely dominating the sport, and they're doing more or less everything right. And what I'm missing here, and I really feel that needs to be done, is that American male discus throwing is going to come on the map. And you have great coaches. Krauser is coaching a Jamaican guy. Mo is coaching a Lithuanian guy. And I'm saying, if those top coaches in America are going to start to coach American kids to throw the discus on the male side, my wish is that you're going to have a great discus thrower in LA from USA, because the knowledge is there. But they are coaching foreigners that they have recruited to the schools, etc., and they are winning. And so my wish, because I'm more or less brought up in America, both in school in Alabama, and all my idols, Mac Wilkins, John Powell, Al Arthur, and all those guys were Americans. So I feel very much for that we are going to see a new powerhouse from America throwing far on the male side, as well as Valerie Allman is doing now, and Stephanie Brown won also, what, in 2004, or Stephanie?
2008, I think.
2008.
Yeah, she won also on the women's side, and Finlay was great in 2017. Casey Malone was good. Tony Washington won the Worlds. But we need the guy and the knowledge of discus and the knowledge of those young coaches in the college system in America is so much better than 10, 15 years ago. And because of that, I think everything is open, that we're going to have more 70-meter throwers, and then also prepare them for the boring meets, what I call those meets, because the fun meets are the throwing meets in California on the throwing fields with the picnic and hanging out with college friends, like from Friday to Saturday. I really like that. But that's not this business. This business is the call room 1, call room 2, 3 hours away from, or 4 hours away from the Olympic Village. And I call it the boring thing because it's not as free as those meets. And I know that Sepp and Valerie are really preparing for that. And then they win. But if you throw a little bit less in Ramona and more in those kind of meets, that's, I think, the right preparation for the future discus throwers to do. But I understand it also that people are trying to qualify because the qualification standards are way too high. And because of that, people are forced to throw in little meets with huge winds and stuff like that. And thank God that Stona threw further here to show that
Not a fluke. Not a fluke.
that is
It's
absolutely
possible.
great. And my opinion is, and I believe it's possible, even though people say I'm crazy. I think like a guy like Alekna in LA could throw a world record in the Olympics. And my opinion is, if the kid throws 74 meters in a wind when he's 22 and the discus is bobbling or wobbling or whatever you say, he's not hitting it right and it still flies 74 meters in a wind, why shouldn't he be able to, when he's prime time, 26, 28 years old, to throw that in no wind? Definitely. You have to believe that. Matty Denny gets better and better. I'm expecting him to throw 70 meters in the next global championships that is going to be next year. In 2 years, he's probably going to throw 71.50. And, you know, Daniel threw 71.46 last year, and he's a huge guy, but he's not the best discus thrower that ever lived. But physically, mentally, and technically, he was good enough to throw 71.46. It's definitely going to be 72, 3, 4 meters in the future in championships. So that is really my wish.
Huge predictions from Vesteinn. Dan McQuaid, any last final thoughts about Roje Stona's win and this incredibly deep, maybe the deepest we've ever seen, men's discus from Paris Olympics?
I'm just really thankful to be there, to watch that competition with Vesteinn, David Sweeney, also Jeff Milliron, who was a discus thrower for Dane back in the day. It was the 4 of us. I had never met him before, so he just came up, and it was 4 discus obsessives cheering and laughing and watching that meet. It was one of the great sporting experiences of my life. So I'm really thankful to have been there. I would say to anyone, if you can get to an Olympics, it's worth the trouble. The fuss is legit. It's amazing, and just proud to have been there, proud to be part of that sport. And if anyone out there would like to get an inside look into how to prepare an Olympian, what life is like for those guys, Vesteinn and I have 2 books out there. Daniel Stahl, the Gold, the training plan that made Daniel an Olympic champion, and then Gold, the journey, the Olympic journey of Daniel Stahl and Vesteinn Hafsteinsson. Grab those books and you'll get a really nice inside look into this whole process. And then get to an Olympics. It's worth it.
No doubt. Vesteinn, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dan, always a pleasure.
Anytime.
All right, my friends, we will have more Olympic recaps, so stay tuned to the Throw Big Throw Far podcast. Shout out to Mary Tyson. I'm wearing her shirt today, 5th in the world weightlifting, an incredible story, all-American thrower turned world-class weightlifter. She performed the heck out of the clean and jerk and snatch today, and very proud of her, and congratulations not only to Mary Tyson Lappin, but also her coach, Will Fleming, another former thrower, an amazing guy. Dan, Vesteinn, thanks so much. We'll see you guys later.
Thanks.